Hi there, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Steven, and May is another important month in sci fi and adventure and fantasy. May 14th, 1982, saw the release of arguably the greatest barbarian movie of all time, this one being Conan the Barbarian. Because of this movie, a whole slew of other barbarian movies will be released, such as The Beastmaster, Sword and the Sorcerer, Gore, Deathstalker, you name it, Hercules. Tons of them would be released, but there's only one that held the crown. It still does, and that is 1982's Conan the Barbarian. We have Arnold Schwarzenegger as Conan, James Earl Jones as Tulsa Doom. We have Sandal Berman as Valeria. We have Jerry Lopez as Sabutai, Mako as the wizard and the narrator of the film. Funny thing about this film, we had producer Edward R. Pressman had the rights for this film, and he's looking for an actor. And he stumbles across this movie called Pumping Iron, and he sees an Austrian bodybuilder called Arnold Schwarzenegger. Makes him have a read. He's convinced that he's the only person who could play the part, and rightfully so. So, right off the bat, what makes this film stand head and shoulders above the rest? We have Arnold Schwarzenegger, number one. Doesn't talk a lot in this movie. First of all, a lot of people thought his accent would destroy the film, but him talking less builds the character of Conan, showing he's a man of action and not of words. So that works for the movie, number one. Number two, we have John Millis, who comes in, great director, who tweaks a script from Oliver Stone. Oliver Stone had placed Conan in an apocalyptic wasteland where he would fight mutants, which is ridiculous thinking about it now. John Millis, who was a fan of the Vikings and all this, decides to remove the mutants and go towards a look and a feel of the Vikings, which works for this movie. It works phenomenal. We have then, I'm going to say, Basil Polidorus, who does the soundtrack. From the minute it starts, when you see the sword and the fire, that heroic theme, you are teleported into this place and you are hooked into this movie from the get-go. And that's because of the soundtrack. Phenomenal soundtrack throughout this movie. It is like Star Wars. When the minute you heard it, you were like, "Oh my God!" Everybody knows Star Wars. Everybody knows the Indiana Jones. Conan was the same. That just brought you into this world. Also, we had James Earl Jones as the villain. He was hypnotic, and you can only care about your hero's adventure, and you care for him more if he's given a villain who is menacing and cold. And James Earl Jones nails it from the very beginning when he raids Conan's village. The way he looks at his mother before he strikes her, it's hypnotic. Incredible performance by that. And it's easily Conan the Barbarian could be written off as at that time with all these barbarian movies, there was always, gratuitous nudity, violence, and Conan could have been lumped into there as well. But I think John Millis played it correctly. And it's not just gratuitous, there is reasons for it. There's stuff that he does that kind of downplays it and makes it more respectable. There's one point where when Conan is taken as a child off from the village, when Thulsa Doom destroys Conan's village and takes all the children and puts them onto this wheel that they spin, and Conan is the last one pushing the wheel. He then gets brought into to become a gladiator, and he's been given books, stuff he's learned. He's been taught to read. He learns to read, and they give him a woman at one point, and they surround his cage and they give him like a breeder, right? Conan gets up to see she's there topless, and everybody's standing around his cage ready to watch the show. Conan lifts up and puts like a blanket over her and covers her up, and then he brings her down, and you don't see what happens, but you get what's going to happen. But the fact that he went up there and covers her, I thought that was very, very well done and classy. Shows him he's not just a dumb barbarian. There's moments in the movie where you see he's a lot smarter than he looks. I mean, he'll talk to Sabotai. They have their talk about their gods. They're having a deep conversation. Whose god is better? Who sits higher on the throne? Very interesting talk from a barbarian. There's a point where Arnold is fighting Thassadum's army, and he knows he's outnumbered, so he sets up like these booby traps. He has like spears. There's stuff coming out to stab the guys on their horses. He's using his mind. He's not just this, he's not going to stand there knowing there's 100 guys coming. He's going to stand there alone like I'm going to, no. He uses his brain and comes up with a plan. Then we have Valeria, played by Sandel Bergman, who a lot of people thought at one point she's just strictly eye candy in the movie. Granted, she's a beautiful woman. I had a crush on her when I first saw her in 1982. But if you notice, the first time they meet, she's going to rob the same temple as Conan and Sabutai are. But she's the one smart thing. If we're going to scale a castle wall, we'll need a rope. She saves Conan's life more than once in this movie. She's a fierce warrior. So she's not just strictly eye candy like the other movies portrayed the women. Like they're all damsels in distress, and as they fall, their top falls off too, and they're like, no. And she fought ferociously. Also, when she loved Conan, she loved him with all of herself. It was phenomenal. I mean, she tells at one point they've been alone for so long. They met. It wasn't a chance meeting. It's like destiny, and they belong to. They're both the same kind of people, and they deserve each other, right? Conan is madly in love with her. You could see it in the movie. He gives her at one point the biggest jewel from when they robbed the temple, just to show his dedication to her. He doesn't care about. He'll give the biggest jewel. He doesn't care as long as she's with him, right? That's his jewel. She's the jewel, not the treasure that he steals. She's the treasure. And I thought that's what changed and made this movie a lot more epic and a lot better than the rest of those movies. Um, I'm gonna say also the riddle of steel that's throughout the whole movie. A lot of people have their own interpretations of what the riddle of steel is. If you see the movie, you'll understand what I mean. I took it as Arnold is the sword, and it's playing out the riddle of steel. He's getting molded like the sword to suit his environment. Sometimes he's a fighter, sometimes he has to think, and the more you use the sword, the sharper it gets. So the sharper his mind, the sharper his skills. I thought he was the sword. He's the metaphor of the riddle of steel. But that's my take. You let me know what you think when you watch this movie. But I can say this is one of the movies that, in theory, when you look at it, when you read it, it shouldn't work. It should be some sort of B movie but it is a classic in epic adventure. I hope they do create it. There was a rumor that Netflix wants to create another series with Arnold because in the first film they show him years later in the future as a king with a worried and weary brow as he looks over his kingdom, and people want to know what were the other adventures of Conan the Barbarian. How did he get to that point of a worldly and weary king? How did he get there? What happened? What were the events? I would be very, very happy if Netflix would do that and put it in the same quality as The Witcher. They did a good job with The Witcher. If they can get that same level of excellence into this, it would be a great way to cap off this epic series. And I urge you, if you like Arnold Schwarzenegger and if you only were into him because of Terminator, see his humble beginnings and how this created a subgenre of barbarian films. but I think this one is the greatest of all time. I don't think this ever gonna be topped. I think this is the music, the best, one of the best villains ever, and James Earl Jones who will voice Darth Vader. You know, but his presence in this movie is incredible. I love it, and like I said, you can't root for the hero if you don't feel he's met his match with a villain. And Thulsa Doom is Conan's match in this movie, and that's what makes him lethal and scary. That you know he could win. You let me know. You take a look at this movie. I'll put the trailer down below, but it doesn't do the film justice. You need to watch it once if you're in your life. If you're into fantasy, adventure, and like I said, if you like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and if you haven't seen this, you owe it to yourself to watch it one time. So do yourself a favor and go watch this movie. This is Steven from the Aroundtable with my thoughts and love of this movie that teleported me to a barbarian's world, and I've been trapped ever since. See you soon, guys.